Have you ever felt like you were speaking English but no one truly heard you? Like every word you said hit an invisible wall of silence? When I first moved to Denmark and met my boyfriend's family, I thought English would connect us, but it only made me feel more lost. This video is my story about language, belonging, and the strange, beautiful lessons I learned from one Danish family that changed the way I listen, speak, and live. The shock of moving in. They said Danish families are open, warm, and independent, and I believed them. Until the day I moved into my boyfriend's parents' house. The first morning I woke up early trying to be polite. I made coffee for everyone. No one came down. The house was silent like a museum. When they finally appeared, they just said, "God morgen," grabbed their mugs and disappeared again. I stood there smiling awkwardly, holding a plate of pancakes that no one asked for. That was my first lesson in Danish culture. Kindness doesn't always come with noise. That I remember thinking, did I do something wrong? In my country, silence means something's off. It means someone's upset. But here silence was normal, comfortable. They weren't ignoring me, they were just being. I started realizing that in Denmark, people respect personal space so deeply that even love is quiet at night. I heard them talking softly in Danish. I didn't understand a word. My brain translated every sound into confusion. I tried joining in, but my English felt clumsy, my pronunciation foreign. They smiled politely, but I could feel the invisible line between them and me. That's when it hit me. Learning a language is not just about words, it's about feeling safe enough to use them. Science actually backs this up. When your brain senses social rejection, it triggers the same area that processes physical pain. That's why when you're excluded, even unintentionally, it literally hurts. My mind wasn't rejecting English. It was protecting me from emotional pain, so I stopped talking much for a while. I listened instead, to the rhythm of their sentences, the tone behind each laugh, the way silence could mean comfort, not coldness. Slowly, I started to decode the unspoken rules. And that's when I realized, the real shock of moving in wasn't about living with my boyfriend's family. It was discovering how fragile communication becomes when your confidence breaks, and how rebuilding it starts not with speaking, but with understanding silence. Lost in translation at dinner. It was a Friday night, my first family dinner in Denmark. The table looked like a painting. Candles glowing, wine glasses shining, everyone smiling politely. I was nervous but excited. This is it, I told myself. Tonight, I'll finally fit in. Then it happened. Someone made a joke in English just for me. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, even louder, trying to show I understood. But then the father looked at me and said gently, "That wasn't funny for you, was it?" My smile froze. My brain replayed the words. I had misunderstood the entire meaning. What they found funny was actually sarcasm. I had laughed at something I should have questioned. My face burned. I wanted to disappear into the candlelight. It's strange how language can make you feel both visible and invisible at the same time. That night I barely spoke. I pushed food around my plate, pretending to understand their English conversation. They spoke perfectly, but too fast, too casual, too Danish. Their idioms didn't match the textbook English I'd studied for years. My brain lagged behind like bad Wi-Fi. Every few seconds I smiled and nodded, hoping no one would notice. After dinner I cried in the bathroom. Not because they were unkind, they weren't. But because I realized something terrifying. Knowing English didn't mean I could live in English. You see, language isn't just vocabulary or grammar. It's rhythm, emotion, timing. The science of it is fascinating. When you learn a new language, your brain creates a second sound map. Until that map is complete, your ears can hear words, but your mind can't catch meaning fast enough. That's why conversation feels like drowning slowly in sound, so I made a decision that night. Instead of trying to sound perfect, I'd train my ears first. I'd stop translating and start feeling the music of English. And little by little, something changed. I began to notice tone, pause, even the meaning behind laughter. My ears became my best teachers. That dinner, my disaster dinner, became the beginning of real learning. Because sometimes, embarrassment isn't a failure. It's a door opening to a deeper understanding of what connection really means. Silence isn't rudeness. If you've ever lived in Denmark, you know this. Silence is not a pause, it's part of the sentence. But for me, coming from a culture where silence screams something's wrong, it was torture. Imagine this. You're sitting in the living room after dinner. Everyone's drinking coffee, staring quietly out the window. Nobody talks for 5 minutes. Not one word. You start sweating thinking, should I say something? Are they bored? Did I offend them? So you nervously blurt out, "So, nice weather today, right?" They glance over, smile faintly, and nod. Then silence again. Until first I thought they didn't like me. But one day my boyfriend laughed and said, "You know, here silence means we're comfortable with you." That hit me like lightning. That it was the opposite of everything I'd known. In my world, silence means distance. In theirs, it means peace. The more I stayed quiet, the more I started hearing what was unsaid. The tiny sighs of contentment, the soft laugh at the corner of the room, the warmth hidden beneath stillness. Psychologists call this the high-context communication style, where meaning isn't only in words, but in tone, expression, even silence. Denmark thrives on this. They trust that you'll understand without explanation. The funny thing? When I stopped fearing silence, my English improved faster. My brain had space to listen, not just reply. I started noticing how people use pauses, not as awkward gaps but as emotional punctuation. A short pause meant reflection. A long one meant respect. One evening I tried something new. During a quiet coffee moment, instead of filling the silence, I simply smiled and stayed still. My boyfriend's mother looked at me and said, "You're becoming very Danish." It was the best compliment I'd ever received. That was the night I realized, communication isn't about constant talking, it's about connection. And sometimes the strongest connection happens in the quietest room. Because silence isn't rudeness. It's trust in disguise. Learning to listen, not just hear. It started with a podcast, slow, calm, Danish accented English about life, rain, and bicycles. I listened every morning while biking to class, repeating phrases under my breath like a secret spell. "That's interesting. I see what you mean." the more I repeated, the more natural it felt. Like my tongue was finally learning to dance with my ears. But one afternoon, something strange happened. I was talking to my boyfriend's sister and she said, "You don't just hear me anymore. You listen." That moment changed everything. Until then, I'd focused on catching every single word, terrified of missing meaning. But when you listen like that, your brain turns into a scanner, not a human. You process, but you don't connect. Real listening isn't about decoding words. It's about feeling the rhythm behind them. Neuroscience explains this beautifully. When you truly listen, your brain synchronizes with the speaker's brain, literally. It's called neural coupling. It's what makes conversation flow, laughter spread, and stories feel real. That's why when someone tells a powerful story, you don't just understand it. You live it inside your mind. So I began training differently. I'd pause podcasts mid-sentence, mimic tone instead of vocabulary. I'd repeat what I heard with feeling, not just accuracy. Suddenly my English felt alive. The words had temperature, warm, soft, real. One evening, I sat at the dinner table, listening to his family discuss politics in English. I didn't rush to answer. I leaned in, caught the emotional waves behind their words, waited for the right moment, and replied calmly. They all looked surprised. One of them said, "You sound Danish now." That's when I smiled and realized. This was what listening like a native truly meant. Not speaking perfectly, but responding from understanding. So if you're struggling to catch every word in English, stop chasing words. Start chasing connection. When you listen with your whole self, ears, eyes, heart, language stops being foreign. It becomes home. When English becomes the bridge. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. My boyfriend's mother invited me to help bake kanelsnigel. Those sweet, spiral cinnamon rolls every Dane seems born knowing how to make. The kitchen smelled like sugar and comfort. She didn't speak much English. I didn't speak Danish. We stood there, smiling awkwardly, surrounded by flour and silence. Then she pointed at the dough and said slowly, "Like this, you roll gentle." I nodded, repeating, "Gentle like this?" She laughed, "Yes. Very good." It was clumsy, simple, but it was connection. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about grammar or pronunciation. I was just talking. And the more we spoke, the more English became our bridge, fragile, imperfect, but strong enough to carry warmth across two worlds. That moment taught me something I'd never read in any English textbook. Language isn't about being impressive. It's about being understood. When I mispronounced a word, she didn't correct me, she smiled. When she forgot one, I helped. We built sentences like a pair of children stacking wooden blocks. Crooked, unstable, but full of joy. There's a fascinating psychological truth behind that. When people share vulnerability, when both sides admit they're not perfect, the brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It's the same chemical that deepens love, empathy, and trust. That afternoon, English stopped being my foreign language. It became our shared language. Later, as we waited for the rolls to bake, she told me, "You know, I was scared to speak English too. I didn't want to sound stupid." I laughed and said, "We're both stupid then, but at least we're baking." We both burst into laughter and it felt freeing. That day, English wasn't an exam. It was a bridge, soft human alive. And I realized, you don't need perfect words to build connection. You just need courage, curiosity, and a little bit of cinnamon sugar. Finding my voice again. There was a time when I stopped speaking altogether. Not because I forgot English, but because every sentence felt like walking on thin ice. One wrong step and crack, embarrassment swallowed me whole that I'd freeze mid-sentence. Replaying grammar rules in my head, terrified of sounding wrong. I became quiet, polite, invisible. My voice, the thing that once felt natural and alive, turned into a careful whisper. But one rainy morning changed that. I was sitting on a bench near the harbor, frustrated after yet another awkward conversation. A stranger sat down beside me, an older Danish man with kind eyes. Out of nowhere he asked, "Why do you look so serious?" I laughed nervously and said, "Because my English sounds terrible." He shrugged and said, "So what? Mine does too." That line, simple, casual, true, cracked something open in me at IT, reminded me that every accent tells a story. Every mistake means you tried. Every awkward pause means you cared enough to speak. From that day, I decided to speak bad English proudly. To tell stories, to laugh at myself, to ask stupid questions. And funny enough, the moment I stopped trying to sound perfect, my English got better. There's science behind it. When we fear mistakes, our brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone that literally blocks memory and fluency. But when we relax, laugh, and feel safe, dopamine flows, helping language stick faster and sound smoother. Perfection kills progress. Playfulness revives us, so I started talking to everyone. Cashiers, bus drivers, kids, even stray cats. My words weren't polished, but they were mined out. A few months later, at a family gathering, I told a full story in English without planning, without freezing. Everyone laughed, not at me but with me. I could finally breathe. That's when I realized fluency isn't about flawless words. It's about fearless honesty. And the moment you stop hiding your voice, that's when your real English finally begins to speak back. The psychology of belonging. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from living abroad. Not because you're alone, but because you're surrounded by people who don't fully get you. You laugh at the wrong jokes, misunderstand small talk, and constantly translate your thoughts before you speak. It's exhausting. For months, that was me in Denmark, smiling on the outside, disconnected inside. I'd go home after family dinners feeling like a ghost at my own life. Everyone was kind, but kindness isn't the same as belonging. One night, I stumbled upon a psychology article that explained exactly what I was feeling. It said, humans need two things to belong: to be seen and to be accepted as they are. It hit me. I was waiting to belong after I spoke perfect English. But belonging doesn't happen when you're perfect. It happens when you show up imperfectly, and people still listen. So I changed my approach. Instead of chasing approval, I started sharing small pieces of my real self. My favorite Vietnamese dishes, my childhood stories, my weird sense of humor. The more I did, the more people leaned in. They stopped seeing the foreigner. They started seeing me. Neuroscientists call this the mirror neuron effect. When you express genuine emotion, even through broken language, people's brains mirror that emotion. Connection happens beneath the words. That's why even with limited vocabulary, a true laugh or heartfelt "thank you" can bridge miles of cultural distance. Slowly I realized I didn't need to become Danish to belong in Denmark. I just needed to let myself be human. And when I did, everything softened, the conversations, the silences, even the way I saw myself. I wasn't an outsider trying to fit in. I was a part of a shared story, written in 2 accents and 1 universal language. Understanding. Because belonging doesn't mean losing who you are. It means finding the courage to bring your whole self to the table. Mistakes, accent, heart, and all. The real meaning of family. It took me years and countless awkward dinners to understand that family isn't always the people who speak your language. Sometimes, it's the people who listen to your silence. One evening, I was helping my boyfriend's father fix a lamp in the living room. We didn't talk much. He handed me the screwdriver. I held the light steady. When it finally worked, he smiled and said, "Good teamwork." Just 2 simple words, but in that moment I felt something shift. That quiet teamwork meant I was no longer a guest. I was part of something real. Family, I realized, isn't built through perfect conversations. It's built through shared moments, laughter, patience, and sometimes just being there. In a world obsessed with speaking fluently, nobody tells you this. Understanding is a 2-way street. You can spend years mastering grammar, but true fluency is when your heart speaks louder than your accent. Psychologists call it empathic attunement. When 2 people, even from different worlds, start to emotionally tune in to each other. You can't force it with words. You earn it through kindness, curiosity, and showing up again and again, even when you feel out of place. Now, when I sit with my Danish family, I no longer count the words I understand. I count the moments we share, the quiet dinners, the soft laughter, the comfortable pauses that once terrified me. I came to Denmark thinking language was about pronunciation. But what I learned is far deeper. Language is the bridge, not the destination, because sometimes family is simply the people who meet you halfway in English, in Danish, or in silence and still make you feel at home. So if you're out there struggling to belong, to be understood, don't give up. You're not behind. You're just building your own bridge. One honest word at a time. That's what I learned in Denmark. And it changed everything.